All right, guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. I'm here to talk about this announcement that was made for January 4th, Monday Night Raw, which will be a Legends Night, a night where WWE will bring back um, the legends of the wrestling business, some of which include Hulk Hogan, Flair, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and others. This has been tried plenty of times. In fact, I made a video on my other channel back in 2015 about this very same thing, where they kept having to feature the Big Show, they had to feature Kane, they had to feature Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, and it's just like I could have swore both TNA and WWE were doing this exact same thing back in 2010, 10 years ago. And it was lame then. I mean, it was lame when they finally had a WWF match featuring Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair back in 2002. You know what I mean? So I don't think this ploy, this marketing scheme, this ploy will work for WWE. I think this is just another lame attempt to recapture the magic of the 80s and 90s. And we're not in the 80s and 90s anymore. We're in 2020. Just like we were in 2010 before, we were in 2015, we're in 2020 now. And what we need is new stars. We need to focus on the new stars, the younger stars. So, yes, fuck you, Vince McMahon. If you think that you've received your lowest rating ever and you believe that bringing back these legends is going to actually help boost ratings, as if people want to see Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair in 2020 and Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Are you going to trot out next? The Rock? You know, if it were at all possible, you'd bring back the dead wrestlers. You bring back Yokozuna, the Ultimate Warrior. You know, if you could use CGI like they do in Star Wars, and they bring back, like, you know, Peter Cushing, right? And they brought back young Leia in Rogue One. If you could do that with wrestlers, you probably would do that. You know what I mean? Because you don't have an idea how to build new stars. You used to have a used to be like somebody like Hulk Hogan left the WWE and went to WCW. It would be no sweat. It'd be like water on a duck's back, because you'd be able to build up newer guys that were dynamic and different, the Bret Harts and the Shawn Michaelses. And sometimes the fans took to them, you know, like Bret Hart, like Shawn Michaels, and sometimes they didn't. Like Diesel, right? Diesel didn't catch on, but you kept being persistent, even in the early 2000s. You know, yeah, you had that lame match between Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair on Raw, which was the first WWF match to ever feature Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, because you didn't do it in '92. But you still build up new stars. You still build up the Brock Lesnar's, the John Cena's, the Randy Orton's, the Batistas. But now you don't have that. You know, you have who's in your main event. Drew McIntyre, a guy that really nobody really cares about all that much. That's not a big ratings booster. And Randy Orton. And the best thing you've got going in your organization is the Hurt Business, and they don't have the title. And again, I said this with the Nexus. If the faction that you're pushing doesn't have the title, it doesn't really mean anything. That's why the Nexus was not as big a deal as the NWO or the Four Horsemen, or even Evolution, because the person you're pushing, the leader of the faction, has to have the title. So in this case, MVP has to have the title. If MVP doesn't have the title, then it doesn't mean anything. It's not worth anything. The leader of the faction needs to have the title, like Ric Flair had the NWA Championship in the 80s when he was with the Horsemen. That's how it needs to be. And even though Michael Hayes didn't have the title when he was with Freebirds, the Freebirds were still always featured in main events. So my conclusion is bringing back these legends. It's not going to really do anything to, in my opinion, to really boost ratings because people are going to tune in for one night, like they did in 2007, like they did in 2010, like they did in 2017, like they do always when you bring back these legends. And then the next night, when you pivot to the Fiend or Roman Reigns or Drew McIntyre or Randy Orton, it's gonna just look. They're gonna look lame by comparison. Like, look at what wrestling used to be compared to what wrestling is now, and it's gonna look pathetic. You're gonna make your current product look pathetic, similar to like when The Rock came back in 2011 and John Cena and The Miz were in the main event. It was like, look at John Cena, look at The Miz, and look at look at The Rock. It shows you how far wrestling has fallen, and that was 2011. That was 9 years ago. This is 9 years later, and it's fallen even further because you don't even have a guy like John Cena, where you could say, "Oh, all your eggs was in one basket with John Cena." When I first came on here, I made a video about John Cena and how I felt like WWE just kept pushing him and pushing him and squashing people that were put ahead of him, like CM Punk, like um, like The Miz and stuff. People that like Wade Barrett with the Nexus, people pushed ahead of Cena, and Cena just gave him the big kibosh. But now you don't even have Cena on TV all that much. All you have is Randy Orton. So it's kind of like your biggest star was Hulk Hogan, and then when Hulk Hogan left, you put it all on Ultimate Warrior or Randy Savage, and they were always the second in people's mind. So Randy Orton was always the second guy or the third guy in people's mind. And now he's the number one guy. He's the resident legend. He's the WWE lifer, as I've heard him described on several other people's pages. Just bullshit. And it doesn't move the needle. Peace. That's my opinion. I think this is a desperate ratings grab by WWE and Vince McMahon. And it really shows how clueless and out of touch Vince really is. Peace.